I decided to do this because I've seen a lot of install guides out there, and some of them are outdated, and some of them are just wrong, and some of them don't explain, in a way that humans can understand things, or explain why they're doing certain things. See if I can maybe do a little bit better. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to archlinux.org, and up at the top right, there's a download button. And Dark Reader sucks in Firefox, apparently. Okay, so you can go down here and you can download the ISO with BitTorrent if you want to. I never do. If you scroll down a little bit more, they've got these mirrors that you can download from. So just pick one and download the x86-64 ISO. Assuming that that's what you're going to be installing on. If not, like if you're installing on like an ARM or you need something else, you can go look for that. I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to download it. I'm going to back out of there. So once you have that downloaded and saved, you can burn it to a USB or a disk if you want to and install it on a machine. Or I recommend that you install it on a virtual machine using VMware or VirtualBox, whichever one. I'm going to be using an ESXi server, which is VMware. And I guess I'll take you through that too. It's already downloaded. I'm going to access my ESXi server. Oh, yeah, I saved it. Sweet. Alright, so this is my ESXi server. This is just running on a host, and you can fill it up with a bunch of virtual machines. I'm going to go to Storage, Data Store Browser, and in my ISO folder here, you can see I've already uploaded the Arch Linux ISO. And oh, you can notice that there's a date here. They release one of these at the first of every month. There's not really any reason to archive these or save them somewhere. If you want to install it in a few months or whatever, just go download a new one and it'll be updated. Anyway, that's already there, so I'm going to close that out. And I'm going to build a new virtual machine. And I'm going to call this Arch Linux Fun, because we're going to have some fun. So, guest OS, Linux. As far as I know, in any VMware product, there's no Arch Linux option here, so you're going to have to just find other Linux, 64-bit. Or 32, whatever you want to do. Next. Choose where you want to save it. And you don't need much in the way of system specs here. So, like, a gig of memory is more than enough. 8 gigs of hard drive space is more than enough for just a minimal install. We'll make that 10 just to round it off. CPUs, 1 would be fine. Give it 4 or whatever. So down here on CD drive, data store ISO file. So, and I'll pick the thing that I downloaded earlier. Select that, and that's going to act like a CD drive. Alright, so this looks all good. Next. Finish. That's fine. Now I need to find... There it is. Arch Linux Fun, right there. So now that that's all set up, I'm going to go back to the archlinux.org. And there is one guide that matters. If you go to the wiki, and there's an option here for installation guide. This is the only guide you'll ever need. It's simple and easy. I've seen some people that run through it and they miss steps, but that's because they didn't actually read it. They were just looking for code blocks and copy paste or just copying those. Like, read the whole thing. You'll understand. It'll open up your eyes. It'll enlighten you. Okay, so since I don't want to be doing this the whole time, I'm going to set it up just like that's fine. Okay, so this is all the pre-installation stuff on, checking the hash on the ISO that you downloaded. I'm not going to do that. You can if you want to. And this is telling you how to boot the live environment, which that's the easiest part. That's the only part that you should probably skip. There's a few little ones, but really you should read the whole thing. Alright, so I'm going to spin this up. And you'll come up to a boot menu like this. Just pick the top one, boot Arch Linux. So, and this is not like other systems that you've installed before as far as any other version of Linux like Ubuntu or Mint or even Manjaro or even Windows. Yuck. There's no graphical installer, and the image that we just booted isn't going to be the image we're going to install. And I guess I'll explain that in a little bit. So okay. So you boot in and you are root in a live environment. This is Arch Linux. This is it. To install, we're gonna follow the installer here. If you are not in the United States, or you're using a different keyboard or whatever, you're going to want to go through this top part, and I'm not going to do that. And typically, our boot mode is going to be UEFI. I'll be doing this in BIOS mode, but I'll make comments on how to do it in UEFI mode, because I didn't make this VM UEFI. Okay, so it says you want to connect to the internet, ensure your network device listed and enabled by using the command IP-link. Or you could just do IP-A and it'll tell you, like down here on ENS33, I have an IP address down there. I should be just fine. And if you can ping archlinux.org, then you're golden. Hit Control-C to stop that. Okay, now we're going to want to update the system clock with time, date, CTL, set NTP true. And if you want to check that, you can not star status. And if that looks all good, that'll be fine. So our next adventure is to partition our disk space. So if you do an disk tac L, it's going to list your disks that you have on the machine and any partitions that are on them. So I have just an unpartitioned disk here, and it's called /dev/SDA 10 gigabit or gigabyte, sorry. And you can see underneath it there's no partitions or anything, so I'm going to have to partition the disk. So to do that, you do fdisk /dev/sda, enter. And now we're in the fdisk command line. You can hit M if you're ever in trouble and you don't know what you're doing. But here's what we're going to do. You hit new, N for new, and we want that to be a primary partition. Partition number 1, first sector, that's fine. Okay, now for last sector, I'm going to be creating a boot partition here, so I'm going to do plus sign and 512 megabytes. For this, change that with T, and I forget which. Alright, I'm going to do a FAT32, so that's going to be B. The next partition we want to do, we'll do new again, primary, partition number 2, first sector, that's fine. You could do this one of two ways. You can build a root partition and then like a home partition, and you can do this for anything you want. I'm just going to do one partition for the rest of the drive. So I'm just going to hit enter, and that'll fill up the rest of it, that 9.5 gigs, with that. Okay, so if I do back M, W is going to be to write the table and exit. Okay, so now if we do, whoa, I cannot spell. If we list with fdisk, we're going to see our 2 partitions there that we just created. And we're still not done with that. We need to make a file system. So for our boot directory, I'm going to make that FAT32. We do that with make fs. And then you just type the SDA1 is going to be for that. And then for the rest of it, make fs. ext4 is going to be the file system we use for the rest of our Linux system. Alright, now if we go to fdisk-l again, you'll see that it's the same thing. But now they have file systems on it, so that's good. They're happy little partitions now. And one thing I did skip that I don't typically use swap partitions, but if you want to, you can add a swap in there, and you can do that with fdisk. It's an option in there, and this is how you would do that. Instead of doing the mkfs to that partition, you would do mk swap and then swap on to that particular partition, and it would make it a swap partition. They typically recommend you do that if you're going to be like hibernating, or if you have a low amount of RAM. I don't think it's as common as it used to be. But anyway, we're going to need to mount all these. So where they get mounted, you mount them in the /mount folder, and that's the /mount folder on this live environment. So what I'll do is I'm going to mount the root partition first. SDA2, and I'm going to space /mount. Okay, now I'm going to make dir /mount/boot. And now I can mount SDA1 to mount/boot. Now, if I do an ls/mount, there's that boot directory. And that other partition is now mounted there. So this is where I was going to explain that the system that's going to be installed on the computer is not the system we're actually booted into right now. It's actually in that /mount folder. So that's going to be the target for the whole installation. And then since we mounted all of our partitions to that /mount folder, it's actually installing it as we go. Okay, so they go through here to select mirrors, which are in Etsy mirror list. By default, they're all enabled. What I like to do, it can take quite a while to install if like, well, let's see here. Okay, so right now, if I just did this, it would try to take stuff from Australia first, which I'm just going to comment that out. United States, that's fine. Okay, I'll just make sure United States is up there in the top view. And that's probably fine. Control X to exit that. Yes, I want to save. Enter, and it's saved. So the next step that is going to happen is we're going to use the Packstrap command here to install our actual system. Recently, earlier this year, I suggested some edits to this part of the section because Linux firmware was not in there and it's hard to boot your system without that. And they also went and explained a little better on what you're actually doing and suggestions on different things to install as well, like a text editor. You're going to want stuff for networking, because if we get all this installed and then you reboot the system into it and you don't have network, you can't install anything. All of that needs to be taken care of. So we're going to run the Packstrap command. And I'm going to /mount is where we want it to install. And we want base. I always install base devel. That gives you tools for like making packages and all sorts of things. We want Linux. Linux firmware. And a text editor. Most of us are using Nano. You can install Vim if you want to. That's fine. Another thing is we are in a virtual machine here, so I'm not going to install it, but if you're installing this on bare metal, if your processor is an AMD processor, you're going to install AMD-Ucode. And if you're Intel, Intel-Ucode. We're going to leave it at this, and it's going to be just gravy. We'll do man too. Because who doesn't want the manual? Xinfo. So you hit enter there. It's going to update its databases and everything, and then it will start installing. Okay, so now Packstrap is done. That took about 5 minutes or so. It could vary depending on your internet connection speed and all that. So now our system is basically installed. We don't have a bootloader or anything, and that's our next bet. And we don't have networking installed. So if we do an ls on our mount directory, you see we have all these familiar directories there. That's our glorious Arch system there. So our next step is we're going to be installing the Fstab file. So what the Fstab file is it mounts all of your partitions when you boot your system. And it's very, very important. So here's what we're going to do is gen fstab. And we're going to base this on UUID. That's what the TAC-U is of our partitions. It's much better than using the actual device names like SDA 1 and 2 and whatever, because those are subject to change sometimes. So we're going to do the /u. We're going to put it in mount. So we're going to put /mount/etc/fstab. And for the actual system we're installing, it'll just be /etc/fstab. So if you ever need to edit that, that's where it'll be when you're actually booted into your system. And I'll show you that here in a minute. So we're going to install that. And all that's left to do, we're going to change root into the new system. So once we do this, it's going to be like we're actually using our new system. Okay, you see how that changed there? So if I just do an ls here, everything that just read out there that I did the ls/mnt, it's all the same stuff except for now we're just in our new system. Wonderful. So some things that we need to address are time zone and hardware clock and all that. Kind of need to know that. So we're going to make a link. So ln-sf user share zone info / and here you're going to put your local information. So I'm in America and Chicago is in the same time zone that I'm in. So I'm going to link that file right there to /etc/local time. So now we're going to run HW clock. And to be perfectly honest, I really don't know what the hell that is. I know it's important if it's in there though. You can always click on these things to find out. So it's an administrative tool for the time clocks. Display the hardware clock, time, blah blah blah. Yeah, if you're interested in that stuff, you can always click around. The Archwiki is wonderful, even if you're not using Arch. For localization, we need that. We're gonna wanna edit this, and if you're in the US, just come down here, and in the examples, you can just comment these out. Or you can go all the way down here and just find whatever's right for you and comment them out. And what I mean by comment them out is take away the pound sign to where it's just out there in the open, all vulnerable like. So Control X, yes, enter, and that's saved. After that, we'll do locale-gen, and it picked those up right away. All right, now our locale.conf file. We're going to create that /etc/locale.conf. and enter your language in there. That's mine. Control X, yes, enter, and that's saved. So here's where, if you had set the keyboard layout up at the very top to like a German layout or whatever, you can make that persistent here, but it's defaulted to the US layout, so I'm gonna leave that. For network stuff, we're gonna edit our host name. And I'm gonna call this GenericEric Arch. Yes. And then our host file, which is /etc/hosts. That file already exists. We're just going to be adding things to it. So 127.00.1, that is your localhost address. Like if I had like a web browser running on my computer and I wanted to access that web browser, I would just open a web server. I would open a web browser and I could type 127.0.0.1 and it would take me to the web server that I'm actually running locally. So that's what that is. ::1, that's IP version 6. Alright, and now we're going to enter the host name that we just had. .local domain, or if you are on a domain, you can just type your domain name there. And then type your just the host name again. And we're going to save that. And another thing, you can, they have it here, but that's kind of not something you need to worry about here for like a static IP or whatever. You can deal with that later. So to complete the network configuration, you're going to want to install your preferred network management software. I prefer using Network Manager. So pacman -s means we're going to install something. If you're familiar with Debian or Ubuntu, that's the same thing as saying apt-get install. Network Manager. Yes, install that. Because if we don't, and we get all done and reboot, we're not going to have any network. Okay, in addition to that, you're going to want to install DHCP service. So that's pacman -s DHCP CD. Okay, and you're going to install that just the normal way. And then once you boot into your system, you're going to want to enable that with systemctl enable DHCP CD. And also, that will not start it right away. So if you do system control start DHCP CD, that will start it, and then you'll grab an IP address. And you can go look through all the other network managers and everything, and that could be useful to you. I prefer Network Manager. It's nice and easy to use. You're going to want to set a password for root, and you just do that by typing password and then entering your new password. Updated successfully. That's awesome. So next is you want a bootloader. So we're going to go look at bootloaders. There's all these bootloaders to choose from. Lots of people use mainly either systemd boot or grub. Or grub up here. I like grub. And this file, there's only a couple of lines here that we care about. And we're doing this on a BIOS GPT configuration. This is going to tell you how to install it. You install the grub package. So pacman, packS, grub. And I'm going to stop here for a second and say if you're doing UEFI, which you most likely will be doing on your actual computer, you're going to also install EFI boot mgr. But I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to install grub. Yes. Okay, so now grub is installed. The only thing we have left to do here is grub install, tac target tools. SDA. Okay, finish, no error reported. And if we were doing UEFI system, that command would look more like this. And that directory there, since I made ours boot, you would substitute that for that. Otherwise, you would just make that ESP. And whatever you name it here is whatever it shows up in your actual BIOS, or UEFI, sorry. There's another command down here that you have to run that actually creates the grub config. Make config output /boot /grub /grub.cfg. And here it should pick up our VM. Yep, there's our VM Linux images and our fallback. So that's good. And at this point, we could exit. And now we're back in our live environment. And I think they recommend that you unmount everything. Yeah, if you do umount tac R means recursive, so that means it'll unmount all the folders. Okay, so now if we do an ls/mount, there's nothing there because we unmounted it. But the good news is right now, if we type in reboot, there is our grub menu, Arch Linux, and now we're actually booting into our new system. And there it is, GenericEric Arch login. Root. Use the password that you set up before. And this is Arch Linux. So I'm going to make another video on what to do post installation, because my guess is you probably want like a desktop environment and stuff like that. Yeah, so I'm going to make a whole nother video on that. I think Oh yeah, I didn't enable DHCP. I don't know if I installed DHCP. Okay, yeah, that's a problem. I'm gonna have to go back and clip that in there, so you'll already know that. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next guide.